And the industry has known for years, for the whole time it's been going on, the suffering and cruelty that there, if I can use the term, business model inflicts on animals. They've known it for ages. And as hard as that footage was to watch, we've all seen, all of you have seen similar footage like that that's been taken by Animals Australia, by Animals Liberation, by the RSPCA over the years that this dreadful trade has been going on. Now is the time, because there's been a lightning rod with that footage, for the trade to be banned permanently. They've done so in New Zealand. The Canadians are going to stop their export trade of pigs. I say they're going to, but I believe it when I see it, but I know that they're looking at it, so that's a good move. And there's also moves in the European Union to look at the live export trade. So I'm saying that the trade in live animals is inherently, fundamentally wrong. It's cruel. I'm just 6 months into my second term. In my inaugural speech, I pledged the people of Victoria that I would make animal welfare one of the things that I would dedicate my time in Parliament to. I've called for an end to jumps racing. I've called for an end to puppy farms. And just this week, on Wednesday, I made the upper house of the Parliament debate duck shooting, the first time. Voted to end duck shooting. It was defeated on party lines. All the other parties, all the other members voted with their parties to keep duck shooting, even though I know there are individual MPs who don't support it. But none of them were courageous enough to make a stand. So all of you out there have to keep putting pressure on them until duck shooting is finished as well. But I know we're here today about live exports. The Greens in the Federal Parliament, our member for Melbourne, Greens member for Melbourne, Adam Bant, has introduced a bill into the Federal Parliament to stop the live export trade. During the duck shooting debate on Wednesday, a couple of members said that I shouldn't be so emotional about it, that I should just be rational about it. And I was emotional during the speech, and I had to take a couple of breaks when I was describing what happens to ducks. And to be able to describe what happens to animals when they're stuffed on transport trucks and when they're stuffed on ships and they die from disease, they get crushed, they can't eat, they can't drink. How can you not get emotional about it? So thank you all for coming today.
Thank you so much for that, Sue. And as Sue mentioned earlier on, we all very touched by the graphic images of the animals that we saw in the abattoirs of Indonesia. Now, please keep in mind, those animals did not die in vain. They died so that we can stand here and fight for them and be their voice. The next speaker on the agenda is Kelvin Thompson. He's an MP and he's a federal member for Wills. Please welcome Kelvin Thompson.
Come really close.
Like Sue, the footage that I will never forget from the ABC Four Corners program was that footage towards the end of the black cow trembling uncontrollably as it watched other cows being killed and cut up in front of it. And there was the voiceover from the experts saying that animals like sheep and cows do feel fear. And I thought to myself as I watched that footage, surely we can do better than this. We can do better than this. My parliamentary colleague Janelle Saffin and I gave notice of motion in the caucus the next day the government announced that it would ban the export of live cattle to the dozen or so abattoirs which had been outed and exposed by that footage. But Janelle Saffin and I and others made it clear that we would proceed with our notice of motion because there are something like 100 other abattoirs in Indonesia, and we could not be confident that those practices would not be going on at those other abattoirs. And secondly, we saw boats being loaded for export going off to Indonesia in the days after that, and we could not assure the Australian people that those cattle would not be subjected to the same practices that we had seen on Four Corners. The Australian public demanded action. The Australian public did not want business as usual. And then the Australian government did act. It acted to suspend live cattle exports to Indonesia. And that suspension has done a power of good. It has brought about a flurry of activity on the part of the Indonesian government and on the part of the authorities, and I believe that that activity will lead to an improvement in animal welfare standards. And I am very proud of the members of the Parliamentary Labor Party who stood up for decency in our treatment of animals. There has been pressure for a lifting of the suspension, and that pressure has come from Liberal and National Party members each day moving notices of motion. They did it on Wednesday and Thursday. They've got another one in the Parliament on Monday demanding that the suspension be lifted. And I am very concerned that if the suspension is lifted, we will see a return to the barbaric and outrageous practices that were exposed by the ABC Four Corners program. And so I urge all of you to contact your members of Parliament, contact Liberal and National Party members of Parliament, but contact all members of Parliament, because we live in a hung Parliament, both House of Representatives and Senate, and all members' views are important. And contact all of them and say, we do not want a return to live cattle exports to Indonesia. Tell them the jig is up on live exports. It is time to move to domestic processing. That is the future of the meat industry. I suggest contact them by emails, contact them by phone, seek to visit them in person. They may raise objections with you. They may say that this is inhumane to the cattle who are in Northern Australia, that they may starve. Let me tell you, this is not true. There are animal welfare standards in practice in Australia which make it illegal to starve cattle or simply turn them into the bush. So it is not true that there is some debacle now occurring or about to occur in Northern Australia. They may tell you that this is bad for the industry and that many jobs will be lost. Let me tell you again, this is not true. There are abattoirs in Townsville, in Mackay, in Rockhampton, which have spare capacity, and these animals can be fattened up and be part of the meat processing industry in Australia. As for the jobs, the fact is that since we moved in the direction of live exports, there have been over 150 abattoirs closed in the past 30 years, and some 40,000 jobs have been lost, 1,000 jobs lost in the past year. So that is where the job losses have occurred. They may tell you that Indonesia will go elsewhere for its beef supplies. Again, this is not true. Indonesia has put out feelers in relation to New Zealand. New Zealand, which to its credit has a ban on live exports. New Zealand has said no. The fact is that beef production in 2010 was down the year before. So there is not some way in which Indonesia can simply source beef elsewhere. In 2006, following similar revelations of animal cruelty in relation to exports to Egypt, the then Howard government banned live cattle exports to Egypt. That ban remained in place for 3 years. The sky did not fall in. Egypt was able to source meat from Australia, chilled beef. So it is not true that They may also tell you that this will give offence to Indonesia and damage the relationship. In the first place, President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono has ordered his Health Minister and Agriculture Minister to visit and inspect those Indonesian abattoirs. That is not a bad thing, that is a good thing. That is a step in the right direction. Furthermore, everything I have been told about halal killing is that it is not inconsistent with humane treatment of animals. But in any event, religious convictions cannot be allowed to override our obligation. Exclusive Brethren would like the government not to enforce its workplace relations laws because they think that conflicts with their religious obligations. But we don't do that. You are not allowed to have multiple wives or multiple husbands as part of your religious convictions. So religious convictions do not get us out of our obligations to deal with animals.
Right. Yay!
Processing industry is not as lucrative or profitable as live exports. Now, it is my belief that this is not so. There have been studies done of this issue by outfits like ACEL Tasman, which have said that processing meat in Australia adds value of the order of 20%, and it stands to reason that downstream processing value adding is better than simply the live export. But in any event, some things are more important than money.